Peter Tertzakian is something of a guru and a visionary in the oil and energy business. The day job is as the chief energy economist and managing director at ARC Financial, based in Canada, but he's here in London to spread the word and give some sage advice and analysis about what's happening in the industry, and he joins us now. So here we are at the Oil Council. I suppose the really hot topic, inevitably, is the price of oil.
Of course.
Where's it going and how much lower can it go?
Yeah, well, it certainly can go lower. I mean, the markets want to take it down, and sometimes you can't fight the tape, as they used to say. So it would not surprise me to see it go lower, but we know from historical market behavior that the lower it goes, potentially the higher it goes. So I do expect that there will be a rebound at some point, and the question is when and how high. I would suggest that if the free market is going to take care of it, if supply is to start moderating and the demand is starting to come back, you're probably looking at 12 to 18 months before we'll start to see upward movement again in the oil price. But as you know, Nigel, I mean, the geopolitics of oil are never too far away from a barrel, and that anything can happen in the Middle East, North Africa, or other parts of the world that could accelerate it.
But I mean, you are, as well as being a sort of, one would suggest, a futurologist,
yes,
being able to sort of predict what may happen.
Yeah.
You do that by looking at what's happened in the past. And in
Yes.
the past, when we had these regular periods of very low oil prices,
right.
Is there anything we can learn from that? Can we expect that we're going to get the same outcome, or is it going to be different this time?
Well, I mean, the closest analog to what's happened today, arguably, is what happened post the oil price shocks, where we had very high prices, and then we had new technology come at us on the offshore, and the North Sea came on strong, and the Gulf of Mexico came on strong, and really served to bring up the supply at a time when demand was weak. So in that case, in that example, it's highly metaphorical today. However, the difference between today and, say, 40 years ago is that we do have several billion more people, and we do still have industrialization in countries like China, India, and elsewhere, and the draw on the oil demand is still quite strong. The new technologies we see today are not the offshore ones, they're the onshore ones, and I do expect that they are going to continue to be producing prolific amounts of oil. But you know, the fraction of that oil relative to the global oil supply complex is actually still relatively low, and there's a lot that can go wrong with that much larger conventional fraction out there.
Yeah, I suppose it's a nice idea that the free market will find its own equilibrium. But in the absence of that, and certainly there are no signs of that happening anytime soon, people are looking to OPEC. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, it's very hard to predict what's happening behind the doors of OPEC. The OPEC of today is not, in my opinion, as strong as the OPEC of yesteryear, given that the problems in places like Libya and the Middle East, that many countries cannot afford to cut back even if they wanted to. So it really is up to some of the key players, notably Saudi Arabia, to cut back. They don't seem to have any intention to do so. I don't blame them. I think they're testing the market to see at what point places like the United States are going to start to feel enough pain to stop drilling. I suspect that pain is going to come around $70, $75. So we're almost there, and we'll see how the market reacts, and we'll see what OPEC does. But I also think that there's many more variables than just OPEC today.
Yeah, but even so, I mean, there's this kind of conspiracy theories being bandied about that this is OPEC and Saudi in particular is sort of doing it to teach the US that it can't afford to flood the market with.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the conspiracy theories abound, of course. I mean, and then of course the conspiracy theory would suggest, an extension to this theory would suggest that the Americans are flooding the market to put the pressure on the Russians and so on. I offer that then perhaps it's the Canadians, where I come from, where we have actually increased our production by 1 million barrels a day over the last few years, and we and the United States can be accused of flooding the market. So where does the conspiracy lie?
Yeah, so it's all the Canadians' fault.
It's the Canadians' fault.
But actually, that's quite interesting that if you have been doing that, nevertheless, as a country, Canada has had to live with the lowest oil prices of any major nation. And yet you managed to do it quite well.
Well, absolutely. We have had the lowest oil prices and the lowest natural gas prices in the world since around 2010. And why is that? It's because we have been captive to the United States market. We have not had and still do not have the infrastructure to allow our oil and gas to flow into the global market. So we've had deep discounts. And so our low oil and gas prices have had some very interesting consequences. Initially pain, but then the realization that we have to live with these prices, that we have to innovate, that we have to find alternative ways of getting our products to the market, in other words, like railroads. But most importantly, and what is being talked about at this conference, is cost discipline and innovation. And the Canadians have gone through this period of 3 or 4 years of learning how to innovate, learning how to moderate costs. And this is something that the rest of the world's oil industry is going to have to learn now over the next couple of years. And it's going to be painful.
So they're going to have to learn from the Canadian model, the Canadian example, because I think, I think you were saying in one of your presentations here that the nature of oil supply is changing quite dramatically in ways it never has before.
It has, and it is continuing to. I mean, whereas we see more investment into the U.S. and Canadian tight oil, shale oil, the horizontally drilled and fractured type oil, that supply of oil has extremely steep declines. And so I call it the just-in-time delivery model. You have to drill or your production falls. And it can react with greater elasticity to falling demand. So it's very much like the just-in-time delivery model of manufacturing companies. Whereas if you look at the conventional model that most of the rest of the world operates on, that has a very low elasticity to price, big capital mega projects that are years in the making. It's very slow to respond to changes in demand. So as the emphasis shifts from the conventional to greater amounts of unconventional, you are going to see the world's oil industry become much more just-in-time delivery at the margin. And I would argue that that means that it's going to be able to react much faster to lower price episodes and self-correct. But it will also mean that when the price goes too high, it will come and moderate back. Now, you probably are saying, well, what's going to be the long-term equilibrium price? And that is yet to be determined. But I would suggest it's probably blended together somewhere around 90, possibly up to $100.
Yeah, but I mean, if we are living in this bifurcated world, and it's the non-conventionals which are going to be producing just-in-time solutions, that may well be the best option, because nobody at the moment is altogether clear when we're going to get peak oil demand. That's the big imponderable, much more so than it's ever been.
It is imponderable, and with China, which has been driving oil demand in a very aggressive way for the past 10, 12 years, is going through the same dynamics of industrialization as every other Western country has gone through in terms of its energy. So what is that dynamic? First of all, you go through this period of extreme inefficiency and rapid surge in energy consumption, including oil, as your country gets wealthier. And then you realize it's unsustainable, and you also realize you're making a big mess environmentally. And so you have what I called in my first book a breaking point. And China has classically started to go through that. And now they're starting to become much more efficient and mindful. And eventually they will go through the same metamorphosis as Western countries have, and their oil consumption will flatten out. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to believe, but every Western country has gone through it, and more recent memory, countries like South Korea have gone through it, and I fully expect in the next 10 to 15 years you will see peak oil demand somewhere between 100, 105 million barrels a day.
Okay, Peter Tertzakian, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Well, thank you.